Bitcoiners, hope you're doing well. Let me make sure I've got everything set up properly, right? One thing we dislike is when the stupid order of this stuff gets out of whack, but it looks like we're doing great. Good morning, Austin. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Enmity. Hope you're doing well. I just got to remind everyone, I just checked outside. It's been a blazing, beautiful sun all day so far. Bitcoin running just fine. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. And B for Victory says, good morning, Bitcoiners. As you know, we like to start every one of these morning coffees with Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time. The fakest news we can find, right? What's the fakest news I got today? Well, this one's pretty good. So there's been some congressional testimony about what's going on with energy and the end of the world because of global warming and all that kind of stuff. And Representative Cory Bush had the following to say: I can only imagine the number of my constituents who are unknowingly being poisoned by their gas stove. So be very careful. We've been warning everyone here about gas stoves, right? We just found out it was a huge danger a few months ago, but now that everyone knows, right, get rid of your gas stove because you're going to get poisoned. Now, we've seen these Patriot Front folks running around, right? The Guardian and they mask themselves. They're the only conservatives that mask themselves in the world, right? There's no other conservative who believes in masks except for the Patriot Front folks. And these are the people who wear the khakis and they go talk about white supremacy stuff and say, yay, white people, they're the best at everything. And everyone else is terrible, right? That's basically what they say. But sometimes people are worried about it not just being white people who are chanting, white people are the best at everything. You remember the old Dave Chappelle skit, right? The racist, blind African-American guy. Well, it's just everywhere in the real world now. It used to be just a joke, right? When Dave Chappelle did it like 20 years ago. But now we're seeing all kinds of logic around it, right? So here's from The Guardian. The allure of fascism. Why do minorities join the far right? A white supremacist ideology would appear to be antithetical to people of color, but there's a perverse logic at play when they join extremist groups and they use the picture of the Patriot Front because sometimes they get their masks off, right? Not when they get arrested, but other times we get to see what they look like. The Atlantic had to pick up on this as well. So here's an Atlantic headline: Latinos can be white supremacists. A mass shooting carried out by Hispanic suspect who authorities said had neo-Nazi ideation caused some confusion. It shouldn't have. It shouldn't have, said Adam. I'm going to say his name is Sewer. I don't know about that. So there you go. That's what we got today, right? We got a lot of not white people who are white supremacists, which just happens to remind me of a Dave Chappelle skit. That's just me, right? It's just me. So the big news yesterday was Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. He's officially running for president now. And a lot of people talking about his launch. So he chose to launch the campaign. He had a pretty slick TV ad yesterday. It was excellent, actually, if any of you saw it. But then his official announcement that he's launching was held on Twitter Spaces. And what's come of it? Well, first of all, there were some sort of boomer Zoom call vibes at the start of it. It was like, can I hear you? Are you there? What's going on? And everyone was kind of hopping on top of each other, and then it crashed. And so the first few minutes were no good. Very low on the entertainment vibe. But what difference did it make? Not much. The thing got up and running, and millions upon millions upon millions of people joined. It was actually a huge spaces. So here's everyone's reaction. Did everyone give DeSantis a minute to get things straight? Not really. So everyone calls that first few minutes Pretty bad. The New York Times calls DeSantis' announcement a fiasco. NBC News called it a meltdown. The Washington Post called it awkward. Politico calls it horrendous. All right. Elon Musk responded to all those saying, I call it massive attention. Top story on earth today. And that's kind of what I'm seeing, right? A lot of people commenting on why it broke down. So here's a Genera Peck, who got the inside scoop, just got off the phone with Elon Musk and David Sachs, heard behind the scenes details from Twitter as they handled the nearly 1 million people trying to get into spaces. They had more than 700,000 people in the room to start, with hundreds of thousands trying to get in, had to relocate the room. Now, so they just go on and what's going on with this thing. Chris Hayes from MSNBC. I'm sorry that this is an astoundingly humiliating, all caps. So he says, I'm sorry. This is an astoundingly humiliating degree of incompetence, unspinnable failure, total and complete, fully public. Balaji wrote to that they're mad because social media is now much bigger than legacy media. It turned out he had 6.5 million people, if you listen to the Mario Nawfal numbers. So Mario Nawfal, whose spaces I join fairly regularly, said the following. Today's listeners between David Sachs and Elon Musk. So Sachs, by the way, joined Elon in the spaces. So Sachs was out asking a lot of questions. The live stream was over 6.5 million listeners and rising. The CNN town hall with Trump only had 3.3 million. So these are the numbers. The total listeners had 6.5 million on the spaces last night. CNN town hall with Trump, which was like the greatest thing ever, as far as mainstream news goes, had 3.5 million. And here's the numbers that Balaji brought along with MSNBC. He says MSNBC is the second most watched basic cable network in prime time for February 2023. According to Nielsen, the network averaged 1.1 million viewers a day, only fewer than Fox News. MSNBC also averaged 711,000 total day viewers in February, number 2 on basic cable, in addition to ranking number 2. So they get, like a million a day, not a space, a day. All right. So we're in a different ballparks here. And a lot of people sort of breaking these numbers down. It's not just from these two. Let me see if I have a few more of these relevant numbers here. Yeah, that's what I got for the numbers. Oh, and David Sachs also wrote, wow, 6.5 million listeners and growing fast. Thanks to all the legacy media types and political hats for flipping out that the space started 15 minutes late. It was perfect once it got going, and now you're just making it bigger. And that's kind of what I see here, right? I see whenever you get these instances where everyone's paying attention, and there really is no more in the world of attention. Remember, the first lesson in persuasion is attention. You got to get attention. You can't persuade anyone if you don't have their attention. It's one of the lessons I've learned in life, and I think it's really important, right? You can have all the skill, all the technique in the world. If you can't get people's attention, you might as well be talking to a wall, right? Go talk to the cows whose farts they're trying to capture, because that's all that's left. If you can't get eyeballs onto you, it's just not going to work. Right? No matter how many skills you have in your toolbox to persuade, you've got to get the eyeballs there. And Trump is the best at this. We've known that for a long time. We're going to talk about Trump's response to this in a few seconds because it's hilarious, as usual. So the story here, though, I think, as a Bitcoiner. So first of all, you gotta talk about the elephant in the room with DeSantis. So he kept saying people who want to do Bitcoin do Bitcoin, but it kind of works in a sense that what does it mean to do Bitcoin, right? Well, we're going to talk about what it means to do Bitcoin today, because doing Bitcoin, I think, does mean that you're obviously it's not just trading or hodling. Doing Bitcoin might just be your whole worldview comes from a sort of Bitcoin standard. And that's kind of what we do every morning here. We do Bitcoin, right? We put Bitcoin on top of all the subjects in the world, all the main stories. And we try to get a orange colored lens on top of them so that we can make sense of them using Bitcoin as sort of a grounding, as a reference. And that's really what a Bitcoin standard is. We always talk about Bitcoin being a psychological commodity, of course, right? Just like dollars are a psychological commodity. Well, the psychology behind the commodity is one that allows you to measure things. It's sort of a gauge, right? It's a gauge that you can use to measure the effectiveness of almost anything: economic output, energy output. All kinds of things become relevant when you put a Bitcoin standard onto them and you use Bitcoin as a measurement tool. Long-time Breakup folks have always heard that analogy that I use. Water is to the metric system, right? So the entire metric system, for you Americans who haven't heard this story before and don't really know what the metric system is necessarily, I'm not arguing here that, you got to switch to metric. And if you like your inches and you like your Fahrenheit, you can keep your inches, you can keep your Fahrenheit, right? I'm not coming to take them away. But you got to understand the symmetry and beauty of the metric system for these simple qualities, right? So where does the metric system even come from? Well, they just took the properties of water. That's it. It's just water, right? So water boils at a certain temperature and it freezes at a certain temperature. So presto, bang, 100. We'll make that the boiling point. Boom, 0. That's the freezing point of water. And from there, they get all of the temperature measurements just based on the properties of water. But the actual distances and weights and everything like that from the metric system are also derived from water. So you just take a liter of water at ideal conditions or standard conditions. I forget how it's calibrated, but I think it is the standard conditions, 101.3 as far as atmospheric pressure goes, and there's a certain temperature standard. I think it's like 20 degrees. I don't remember the actual standardization of these conditions from which measurement comes from. So they took the properties of a liter of water, and that's where you get a meter from, and that's where you get a kilometer from, and that's where you get all of these other things from. So they're all like a liter of water is just water at the right temperatures and measured to a certain level, and that, boom, that's a liter, right? And then from there you get everything else. And for a long time, I have been using that to explain exactly what Bitcoin can do for everyone's worldview, right? So that's doing Bitcoin. Bitcoin at the center of your worldview. Maybe that's what DeSantis meant. Of course not. But his little mistake in describing Bitcoin, I think, is going to go viral. A lot of people saying, where's the t-shirts? Where's all that stuff, right? Where's the do Bitcoin paraphernalia? I think you're going to find do Bitcoin paraphernalia. That'll be coming. I want to read this one comment as well from Catherine Boyle, and she's from A16Z. And she had a pretty interesting take on what happened yesterday. She says, the lo-fi aesthetics of the DeSantis announcement further show the generational divide that will likely be the story of this election. Its clear age will affect not just narrative, but a candidate's favored mediums and performances too. Now, this reminds me of the old Marshall McLuhan Canadian expression, the medium is the message, right? It was an early comment on hot media, cold media, and the media, in fact, that you use is the message you're sending. And I've always thought that that message fits perfectly with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a medium, and the medium is the message, right? It is a countable system that you can use to gauge everything in the world. That's why we were just mentioning all of these aspects about the Bitcoin standard being both external for measurement of things and also internal, right? You can use it to keep score with yourself for progress and orientation and discipline and all kinds of things like that, right? And I know there was a lot of debate the last few days about the Greg Foss thing on the Bitcoin Magazine show. And, I don't get involved in that, but I did listen because someone told me that Meltem Demirors made a guest appearance in the debate, and she had it perfect. The worst thing you can do for Bitcoin is to make it lame and shitty and not cool. So a bunch of people arguing about ego and where they belong. The true story about the Greg Foss thing is he just cried his eyes out for weeks about where he was on the agenda. Oh, the agenda. Where am I? I'm up against Saylor. It's so hard. I'm up against Saylor. I don't want to be up against Saylor. It's really hard. No one's going to watch my little thing. So really, that's honestly what it was always about. And Melton joined into the thing, and she says, you're not going to become a Bitcoin. She's always if you guys don't know Meltem, and you whatever, don't pay attention to her on Twitter, you're missing out on one of the funniest people going. She has the irreverence Bitcoiners need in order to win this World War III. And I knew she was funny because she said something years ago. It was probably like 2015 or 2016, where she says, I just got back from San Francisco and I had to see, I don't know how many people wearing the official VC uniform, which is the puffy vest with the dress shirt underneath. I'd never heard anyone make fun of that style before, right? It just totally annihilated it. So Meltem, very funny person who we think is great. So but if we're going to keep talking about doing Bitcoin and Bitcoin as a measuring stick, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Trump's response. Did anyone see? Speaking of the medium is the message, right? Did anyone see Trump's response? I'm still laughing. I saw it this morning. So Trump on Truth Social put up a little I guess, obviously fake audio clip with a Twitter Spaces as the image, right? So you think you're in a Twitter Space with the audio file, and it's Ron DeSantis announcing his candidacy. Elon Musk, his profile pic is there, and he's the host. But he's joined by George Soros, Klaus Schwab, Dick Cheney, Adolf Hitler, and the devil. And they're trying to have a conversation. So Ron DeSantis, it's all the mistakes of the launch, right? So it's like the boomers trying to talk over each other, and Dick Cheney keeps coughing, and Hitler keeps losing his mind, and Klaus Schwab and George Soros keep encouraging DeSantis. Come on, you're gonna do great. It was, you got to see it. It's hard to beat, right? So strong points to Trump. I think he was the only person to actually land a punch when it came to criticizing DeSantis for the launch. I think everybody else fell flat with the Chris Hayes approach. Oh, it's embarrassing. Now, remember what we've talked about here, that embarrassment and not being embarrassed, the ability to not be embarrassed, right? The ability to do what Bitcoiners did in the early days and continue to do now, right? I can still remember in the market crash in 2015 and going to deal with mainstream Wall Street type people. Oh, Bitcoin's still around. Oh, you're still doing that stupid thing, right? You have to be willing to suffer embarrassment. There's just no way around it, right? It gets easy when the market goes thermonuclear and everybody's making money and all that, but when you're down in the dumps, in the cyclical nature of the Bitcoin climb, right, when you're in these instances of a bear market and it becomes embarrassing again, oh, so lame, you have to be able to get over that, right? You've got to be able to persevere through that, and the best way is to simply just not be embarrassed about stupid things, right? And not be embarrassed when someone says what you're doing is so cringe, it's so embarrassing. I think most Bitcoiners who've been around for a long time have learned that lesson really well, and of course have learned that the sun will shine anew on another day, so it doesn't even last that long. But I think just in general, right, when we say stay humble and stack sats, right, the idea of staying humble remains super important. And staying humble, part of being humble is that you simply can't get embarrassed, right? They're part of the same equation, if you will. So you can't, it's your ego and not staying humble that would allow you to get embarrassed in the first place. And that's what's really important here. And so when I hear do Bitcoin, right, in some ways it sounds a lot like stay humble, or at least in the case of Ron DeSantis. Stay humble and don't get embarrassed by your little mistakes, I think is going to prove useful. And he'll still get criticized. That's the name of the game. Trump's super duper power is that he is without shame, right? He cannot be embarrassed. I've never seen, when people say, oh, Trump's an egomaniac, I still see the opposite. I've always seen the opposite. Anyone who's willing to take the amount of abuse that he's willing to take, anyone who's willing to be called all the names that he's called perpetually on a daily basis by all kinds of people, has to be able to be a master of their own ego. He just has to be. Now, I'm sure he has a very high opinion of himself. We were laughing last week about that not journalist, remember the lawyer who was questioning him about the E. Jean Carroll or whatever, that rape thing, and or the sexual assault, whatever they've gone with. It's really just lying, right? Remember that case that that we were talking about where he was guilty 2 weeks ago or whatever, and all it was so he said the sexual encounter never happened with the girl who has the dog named Vagina, and she said that, so that the whole thing was about him lying about that. She's saying it did happen, not the assault, but that the sexual encounter did happen. So it was all about being a liar. It was nothing to do with the sexual assault. And if you remember, he was getting questioned on camera by the lawyer, and she's sitting there saying, do you really believe, what did you say about the grabbing of the things and, the Billy Bush interview? And he says, well, yeah, famous people, like, for a million years, they can do what they want. And she asks Trump, so you think you're famous? Imagine asking Trump himself if he thinks he's famous. He's maybe the most famous man in the world. Michael Jordan, maybe in his prime, was more famous. Trump wins on humor and shares with all of us. And DeSantis, I think, is going to be capable of taking the lesson, which is to not let your ego get in the way, right? So, but it doesn't sort of end there. The main thing we're talking about today is indeed not getting embarrassed, as well as just the way the news is going to completely and always just sort of get it wrong, and indeed never have to go back and correct the things that got wrong in the first place, right? That's sort of how this machine is running, right? It just comes out with stories, and no matter how laughable and stupid they are, they just stay straight, right? So here's one, and this is directed straight to Florida. So this is why, not having embarrassment and being able to push through, because it's going to be a bunch of lies, right? Bitcoiners have to realize it's going to be a bunch of lies. It's not going to stop. The lies aren't going to stop. The lies are designed to make you sound stupid, look stupid, all that kind of stuff. Not going to stop. So get ready for that. And look at just how insidious this is. So here's these cases with Florida. So of course, DeSantis running. So of course, the fake news fires up the old engine and starts pushing out more fake news stories. Remember, we were talking on Monday how Black people have been warned by the NAACP not to go to Florida, right? There's a travel advisory in the state of Florida, and I guess for LGBTQ plus people who we love. So the New Republic here. A Florida school has banned The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman, the poem read to Joe Biden at his inauguration after a parent complained that the poem contained indirect hate messages. This is from the New Republic, right? A Florida school has banned the poem read at Biden's inauguration. Another one, this is Chris Hayes, the guy who was lying earlier, right? The guy who was saying, it is so embarrassing, that guy. The poem Amanda Gorman read at Biden's inauguration is now banned in elementary classes at a school in Miami area after one parent complained that it had indirect hate messages and that its purpose was to cause confusion and indoctrinate students. And this is from MSNBC, obviously. The headline here, Florida school bans Amanda Gorman poem after one parent's critical race theory fears. The Daily Beast, a school near Miami, Florida, has barred elementary students from accessing several works in its library, including The Hills We Climb, the poem written and read aloud by Amanda Gorman at President Joe Biden's inauguration. Florida school restricts access to poem read at inauguration, the Daily Beast headline goes. So here, the CNN now, remember, CNN going for legit news, right? They're trying to actually figure this stuff out. So here's what would have... One call from any of any journalists would have taken care of this. In a statement on CNN Tuesday evening, Miami-Dade County Public School spokesman Elmo Lugo said no literature has been banned or removed. It was determined at the school that The Hill We Climb is better suited for middle school students, and it was shelved in the middle school section of the media center. The book remains available in the media center. So none of that had to happen. All they had to do was make a single phone call to find out they had moved the book from kids to middle school. And AG Hamilton 29 captures it all. To recap what happened yesterday, one school district decided to move 3 books from the elementary section of a library to the middle school section. Almost every national news outlet instead ran with a false story suggesting Florida was banning the books, which we just read went on and on and on. Right? So they're never going to double back. They're never going to try and correct the record. They're not even going to call sources. They're not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in the next election. It's just not going to happen. Right? It's the only way to stay in this dream state of, you've got neo-Nazis and that's the real problem. It's not the money. It's not the banking. It's not the war machine. It's not the corrupted media that is in lockstep with corporate interests. It's none of those things, guys. None of those things. It's the crazy white supremacists and the people who are so worried about books and kids' schools that they have to ban them, right? So there you go. The idea here being that, again, right, Bitcoiners who do Bitcoin and create a worldview out of this stuff can resist the types of persuasion simply because you can start to see the holes in the facade, right? What Bitcoiner who has been paying attention with eyes wide open for however long doesn't recognize that this is what happens when you omit information, when you avoid facts, and indeed when you're motivated by a completely different set of criteria than the one some people think you're motivated by, right? Does anyone out there still believe that the mainstream media is interested in educating the public and arming them with information that would help make their life better? It's farcical, right? It's as idiotic as saying that the president is the leader of the free world, that Joe Biden is the leader of the free world. It's as dumb, right? It's prima facie, as we say in law, on its face value, stupid at this point. You need no explanation. But these things continue, right? And folks are still wondering how this kind of stuff can go on, but it continues, right? So let me just make sure I've got the right one here. Yeah, hold on. This is the right one. Previous notes. 1 second. So that's what it is. But what I see in the end is, and it's important, right, to mention it this way. What Bitcoin allows you to do is have this humbleness, have this defense against ego that would set you down the wrong path. Now, when I read a lot of these stories, like with Chris Hayes, right, and some of these folks who are talking about what's going on in the books in Florida, there's 2 ways you can see it, right? There's just one second. There's 2 ways you can kind of see it, right? You can see it as, well, they're lying, right? They're lying. Stupid doesn't really work, right? For a guy like Chris Hayes on MSNBC, stupid, for me, it doesn't work. They can't be that dumb. It's not possible, right? But it's either they're lying, actively lying, or something else. The something else in this case would be mental illness, right? They have a form of mental illness. And when I watch the news these days, that's sort of what I see. It's just mental illness at a scale at which we have never seen before. When people are seeing under every bed another Hitler, right? Which is why Trump, including Hitler in the DeSantis call, was so funny. He's just around. He's just around in the 2024 election. But it's the mental illness that allows you to keep seeing this false world, seeing what is clearly not true and is clearly just a narrative and is clearly just something from someone's brain that they've prompt engineered you to believe, but isn't actually based in reality. That's sort of what we're seeing at scale. You can take this story from Ukraine and the Defense Department from just this morning, right? Just this morning. The defense of Ukraine has offered a series of AI images, and they're all scenes from the Ukraine war. starring the Harry Potter cast. So Daniel Radcliffe and all these people who were in the Harry Potter movie, Dumbledore, they're all redrawn by AI as if they are on the Ukrainian battlefront fighting this war. Now, if that's not a sign of like fan fiction mixed with a form of mental illness for the people who believe what's going on from this kind of stuff, right? The people who are actually getting manipulated. Oh, the Harry Potter cast clearly on the good side of Ukraine. Clearly, this is a war between evil magicians and good magicians, and that's what's going on the planet. Even though in some instances that is what I believe, right? That you have a lot of folks in the world. Now, the analogy that I use for Harry Potter when I describe what's going on in the Ukraine war and in Russia actually extends to almost all of our systems that we're fighting over. And I've often used that analogy here, that it is kind of like the way in the Harry Potter books, the Muggles only sort of know about the different wizarding war that's going on and the different wizards and all that stuff. So the analogy sort of fits. But in this case, that's not what's going on here, right? They're trying to give you the clear black and white story, and really preying on either projecting mental illness by saying this is an accurate way to frame the war in Ukraine and Russia, or else preying on people who even believe this stuff. I mean, they believe it, right? And that's a lot of folks out there who believe that the thing in Ukraine and Russia really is a fight for the good and evil future of the world and all these things. Now, in some way, maybe, but not exactly the way it's being cast here. So the Florida books, the Ukraine defense, right? Both of these cases require you to be so certain that the media sources you're getting are accurate that you would trust them to such an extent that you would believe what's being suggested here. So kind of crazy stuff. And it goes, sort of even further, right? And Bitcoiners are aware that the fight we're in is against all the institutions, right? It's not just banks. It's not just the media. It goes deep to the IRS. It goes deep to, I've made the analogy here before. And I've said this to people for years, right? This was one of my first sort of insights about where things are headed. And in the early days of Bitcoin, what are we going to do about taxes in the future? People would ask me, what about taxes, right? The questions you always got when you did early Bitcoin evangelism and early Bitcoin education was the same two things. It was, what about quantum computing? That always came up, which is how I had the idea to write Satoshi Wedding Murders and how I got into AI and all that kind of stuff in the first place, because that question just kept coming up, and I needed to figure out a way to answer it. But the other one was, how are we going to tax these people? And my answer was, well, you got yourself a problem. And what I would say often is that the IRS in its form that we understand today, I understand there were taxes previous to the Federal Reserve. But the way we understand income tax and the pervasiveness of taxation in our lives actually was born at the same time as the Federal Reserve and the bank cartel. When the bank cartel was set up in 1912, the Federal Reserve sort of came online right after. Remember, income tax is just temporary to pay for World War I. 100 years later, if you spend too much time in a U.S. state, they'll take more than half of your money, right? More than half. And what do you get for it? What do you get? You get a fat person, and we don't fat shame on this show, right? Ever. We don't do that, right? We understand the different stresses that people have, and luckily we're not addicted to food and things like that. Nothing but sympathy for those who struggle with it. But I also don't want to listen to an unhealthy person tell me about health, right? The way you end up in a world where you have unhealthy people who are like Secretary of Health and telling people to do vaccines and all this stuff. The reason why it was so laughable in the world that the health ministers of Canada, of Ireland, whatever's going on in Europe, were such unhealthy, obese people is because you simply don't have any feedback in the system. The system makes no sense. It's all about credentialism. It's all about what school did you go to and what did you do, and respect for authority in those ways. So the IRS, who has unlimited amount of revenue at this point that they can just dump and give to the treasury to pay for all of these unhealthy people telling us about health. Where does this lack of feedback loop and reverence for its position in society come from? Well, it might start to get such a stink on it. Now, people hate the IRS to begin with, right? No one loves the IRS, but it hasn't really, let's say, it hasn't really exposed itself as being a purely political operation before. It seems like it's benefited from this theory that it's neutral, right? Well, the most disgusting case you'll ever find about IRS abuse is the Matt Taibbi case. Remember when Matt Taibbi was testifying in Congress about the Twitter files and everything to do with the national security agencies running the approach and censoring folks when it came to the vaccine in America, using Twitter to shape the message. Well, so they came while he was testifying in Congress, they came to his house, and IRS agents visited his house. And it turns out he's getting more information. Jim Jordan, the commissioner of the House Judiciary Chair, or the House Judiciary Chair, is supporting Matt Taibbi in this. And it turns out we got a little more information. Taibbi tweeted yesterday, the IRS opened a case on me on a Saturday, Christmas Eve 2022, which just happened to coincide with a major Twitter files report on FBI intelligence community ties to tech platforms. This is revealed in a new letter to the IRS commissioner by House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan. So could you imagine that we're starting to get more people, and we're getting this story put out in the open. And my prediction from 2015, maybe, that when we destroy the Federal Reserve System, we will destroy the IRS simultaneously. They were born together and they will die together. And I stay committed to that. That was something I said back in 2015. I don't think the IRS comes out of this election cycle now doubling down and asking for 80,000 new agents, armed agents, all that kind of stuff is going to keep the attention on what they do. And remember, it's an attention game, right? So the whole game here for Bitcoiners, and what we've been predicting with all of these challengers like DeSantis and RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and Vivek Ramaswamy, all of them being Bitcoiners and supporting Bitcoin and promoting Bitcoin, continues to lend credence to the prediction we've made here many, many months ago, that Bitcoin would be the most important subject, the most important debate around the 2024 election. Now you've got Balaji Srinivasan, who has been making that prediction for a while. I saw Caitlin Long on a audio recording yesterday saying the same thing. We said it here first. We don't need credit for it, of course. It's all about staying humble, of course. But we know that the 2024 election is going to be primarily focused on Bitcoin, and it will bring things like the IRS's future into question. So another reason why doing Bitcoin allows you to see a little bit around corners. Now, Balaji's also talking a lot about the confidence in these institutions, the confidence in the Fed. He cited a visual capitalist infograph here today saying confidence in the Fed is crashing. It's at around 36%. It was at a high of 74% at the start of the millennia. So in 2000, it went from 74% down to 36%. Balaji says all the banks that bought bonds in 2021 suffered huge losses because they trusted Fed guidance, because the government sold them billions in bonds that it then devalued. Trust the Fed, end up dead. Pretty good slogan, Balaji. Remember, people believe things that rhyme. Did you know that? If things rhyme, people are more likely to believe it. Don't know why, but it's true. So he goes on, there is a systemic banking crisis. Many banks are insolvent. Authorities are ignoring it. Fed rate hikes caused it. Accounting tricks hit it, and the fixes aren't fixing it. And he also reminds us what the ramifications of Powell lied, banks died meant, right? So this is from thinking about technical fixes, right? Here they say at a press conference on May 3rd, 2023, Jay Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, suggested that the resolution and sale of First Republic is an important step towards drawing a line under the period of reverse stress that started with Silicon Valley's March 10th failure. Mr. Powell's statement suggests that either he did not understand the nature and the extent of the problems afflicting US banks, or that he understood but chose to ignore them, right? So this is, again, what I was saying about the problems in the world today, not really being about ignorance, right? It's not necessarily about being ignorance and stupidity, but more about a form of mental illness, right? It's not about lying or ignorance and stupidity. There is a third possibility, which is a form of mental illness. And the mental illness comes out in ways like we just mentioned with the IRS, and people even thinking that's normal, that a journalist can be targeted while he's hot on a case. And in this case here, that the Federal Reserve in any way is looking out for the little guy. They're not, right? That's not the game being played here. And anyone who is going to try to contort their brain to understand that needs to have mental illness to even make that possible. You've got to have something wrong in your brain. Now, you can lie about it and use it duplicitously and say, well, I'm just happy with the way things are and we've got to keep things the way they are, and that's fine, right? That's not mental illness necessarily. That's just selfishness. We totally get that, right? That's fine. You can also be wrong and stupid, right? That's a whole category unto itself. That's the majority of ways to explain things, right? You can be just dumb. You didn't understand it, right? Forgivable, even forgivable, of course, forgivable. But what we're seeing here is that the only way you can imagine that Powell minus lying and being wrong. Sorry, not Powell himself. Powell either, right? It's the interpretations of it. The interpretations of it, and trying to derive meaning out of it, saying, oh, he's on our side. It's not just that he's wrong, right? This is a form of mental illness. Most politics that you read now, reactions, that's what I see. I see mental illness at a scale that is becoming more and more obvious. Once you see the mental illness, you go, whoa, right? All these people that have been, and Trump drove them, most of these people, to mental illness, right? Trump is probably, with his Trump derangement syndrome, TDS, one of the great, catalysts of a massive outbreak of mental illness around the world. And people are still not put back together. So you get, even looking at the debt as it is, people today talking about Stanley Druckenmiller, right, a Bitcoiner, and Druckenmiller, estimates that the true U.S. debt, with all of the entitlements and everything the United States owes, is up to 200 trillion. The 30-something trillion is not real. It's really 200 trillion. And Balaji says, if it's anything close to that, you can't grow your way out. You could sacrifice 1,000 unicorns plus all of the tech without making a dent. So they won't pay. They'll print. And here talking about what's coming from the potential new currency prints. So look out for that, right? Now you continue to get within the context of that mental illness and people talking about these things and what is the way to deal with this. And Twitter, of course, continues to get criticized. We saw the thing last night with the everyone criticizing DeSantis's launch, and CNN had the following to say, right? Twitter, and now remember, this is the mental illness piece, right? This is the mental illness piece. Twitter, which once offered a platform, this is from CNN, right? From CNN. Twitter, which once offered a platform for democratic movements in the Arab Spring, has been transformed by its new owner into a febrile circus of untamed free speech, conspiracy theories, and unverifiable information. Right? Now, again, the first of all, the community notes piece has been a boon to adding context back into the conversation, right? Everyone in fake news, Fox and CNN and everyone else who creates it, that's what they do. They remove context, right? That's how you generate fake news. You just take the context away and you present it in a sort of vacuum. And, the people with the mental illness, the people who have an inability now to put things back into context or add context themselves, the people who just want to hate, right? Those folks are the ones who are most likely to buy into this kind of thing. And that's why Community Notes has been so effective in criticizing media outlets, individuals, by re-adding context, just the way that algorithm works. And so here, anyone who believes that untamed free speech is so dangerous that it's leading to what they say conspiracy theories and unverifiable information. Well, what about straight up lying or projecting mental illness, whichever it is, right? The amount of mental illness broadcast into people's houses every day by the mainstream media is off the charts right now. I mean, literally off the charts, right? And again, that's what doing Bitcoin gives you. Doing Bitcoin simply means that you have the ability to add context to any conversation, right? You have slowed down your time preference. You're able now to take a bit of time and not get so hot under the collar, not let people prompt engineer you to get angry and write all kinds of crazy shit on the internet, right? And that's where the protection comes from. So there you go, guys. That's what we got. And it actually brings up the point. Have you guys seen the the crypto couple? Is that what they're called? Walker and his wife, who are just the loveliest. They've been doing the Stop the Presses, the New York Times, burning too many trees and all that stuff to criticize, to put the same argument against Bitcoin that the New York Times uses, that we create too much greenhouse gases and all that stuff. So Balaji's also jumping into it. This is actually a good point. The Ox-Sulzberger family that owns the New York Times has cut down literally millions of trees over the years for their personal benefit. That must have had a brutal compounding impact on climate, particularly for trees cut down decades ago. So you can spread the mental illness wide and far if you need to. All right, let's see what we got here. Let's see, a lot of comments today, guys. All right, ready? Abraham was a Republican. I heard he freed the slaves. Yeah, good old Abraham Lincoln, who we love. Joseph, congratulations to the Bitcoin Magazine team and all Bitcoiners for a great week at the Miami conference. Joseph, I'm glad you had a great time. I indeed also had a great time. I loved it. Joe, good morning. P-Man Van with a good morning all. Homemade. Good morning. Is Michael Lewis' upcoming book about the SBF puff piece you said was coming? I don't know about puff piece. I just think so. Here's the problem with Michael Lewis doing a book on Bitcoin or crypto is fine. I mean, it's fine. But here's the thing: all of Michael Lewis's stories are told from the point of view of people that were involved, right? They're always that, right? Which is a fine system. Like it really works. I'm a Michael Lewis book fan. But how do you do that with Bitcoin and not talk about Satoshi? I mean, it's impossible, right? So if you're going to talk about the industry and you're going to try and tell the story through the lens of SBF and all these other people, what about Satoshi? It's not credible unless you try to figure out how the system went ahead without a leader, without a person. And again, I guess I'll bring it back to the stay humble piece, right? The stay humble piece is really hard to capture when you try and tell the story of a system through the egos that push it. And Bitcoin at the source and at the heart of it all is lacking that ego. There is no hero, right? Satoshi's gone. So it just means that it'll be hard for him to tell a story. I hope he does. But if you leave Satoshi out of the story, you're missing the point, right? You're missing the point. I did talk with him backstage for quite a bit about the book and a few things, and I brought this up with him. How do you get there without Satoshi? How do you make this book make sense to Bitcoiners if you don't even talk about Satoshi? So we'll see. I'm not saying he's going to change his ideas or anything, but and if he's just doing it on, what about these crypto exchanges? That's fine. Right? Talking about media crashing, global TV is going broke in Canada, needs big government funding or threatening to, well, let them close, bud. I mean, who watches that shit, right? They're all crying for money. None of them have money. They've been crying for money for years. They cried for money when I worked there, and we weren't going to give it to them. But they're all unreadable now. The National Post is garbage, which used to be a conservative newspaper, but now they were the most anti-Trump, Trump derangement syndrome newspaper you could ever find. Crazy stuff. Bushmaster, the properties of gas. Yeah, PV equals NRT. I thought it was NRT. Anyway, yeah, indeed. And that's where metric system comes from. It used to be that the only countries not on the metric system were Liberia, Burma, and the US, I believe. Yeah, it's only the US. Yeah, it's only America. Fuck the world. It's fine. America doesn't have to change. Do Bitcoin is calling fiat. Yeah, you're right. That's a good way to, if you use this word, you recognize Bitcoin's use case. Yeah, it was like a happy mistake, I think, that he made. I hope it becomes a thing to do Bitcoin. Some do sports, some do Mickey Mouse. Me and my house will choose to do Bitcoin. Yeah, and I think it makes Bitcoin a verb, right? When you do, well, I guess not. You do sports, do Mickey Mouse. No, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Imagine if Trump, the orange man, got orange pilled somehow. Well, there are rumors. He's asking for people, one who you will all know, a Canadian, a pretty interesting Canadian, who was invited to Mar-a-Lago to do just that. So we'll see. He's noticed. He's not stupid, right? He's noticed that other folks are out there saying it. Austin, who the fuck? I mean, nah, doesn't matter. Trump knows humor. It was epic. Yeah. Hey. I'm not sure if I agree with the universal basic income point you made. That is one of the goals of the Great Reset movement. Yeah. I don't. It's not a likeness that I say it. It's not something I want to happen. It's going to. We're in a shifting generation here. So I'm not particularly fond of the idea, but it's not about a likeness or wanting or even agreement. I just predict it's going to happen. It will give the central authority more power. Yeah. As well as enabling the average Joe to be more lazy and reliant. Yeah, that's all going to happen. Yeah. There's no, now, do you get a dignified life? No. Nope. So I still see the contrast will be there. Bitcoin, it doesn't mean Bitcoin is not available. I mean, the only reason we get the UBI is because not everyone will understand or be able to, or will convert, or will have the courage, or will have whatever it takes to go into Bitcoin. So what do we do with these people? What do you do with fake news journalists after all of this comes down? What do you do with them? What do you do with Chris Hayes? What do you do with these people? Right? What do you do with what's that guy for, just the people who are not the mental illness people, not the ones with mental illness, the ones who are definitely lying, right? What's that female journalist who writes in tech for the Washington Post, right? What do you do with these people? They're not going to turn to Bitcoin. Like, the ego is too much. So, right? You got to have something for them. And I think UBI will work better than you think if it's at least measured again. It's not unlimited, right? They're not getting unlimited money. It's going to still be measured against a Bitcoin standard. So it won't be in a vacuum. It will still be relative to something. My prediction is that the US dollar simply becomes political money and food stamps. and there'll be enough, I think, for people out there. And anyway, look at the beauty of seeing some of these career statists be in some form of incentive trap. I mean, it might be the perfect prison. They're free to do what they want, except you're not going to have any money. So we'll see. Don't know. It's not. I'm not arguing for it, right? If I had a magic wand, it wouldn't be around. But my opinion on it is not based on what I want. I'm not fighting for UBI. I just think it's coming. That's it, right? It might be prima facie stupid, but that's why they're all two-faced. Christian reminds us all to smash the like, subscribe if you haven't, right? We love those things. Christian says, we need to get 100 people watching the Breakup Live. Do more, Breakup family. GMPV. One simply does not do Bitcoin. Bitcoin does you. I like that. Yeah, I like that. Yes, downtown. Christian agrees. CK, can we get the Breakup on podcast feed? Yeah, we'll get that out there. I think now that the event is over, going to have more time to get these feeds in. And we were talking about it on our own Bitcoin Magazine Slack yesterday, so it should be there soon. Maybe rhymes are an obvious way of proving some minimal amount of work was done to create the message, or it's something about satisfaction behind the repetition. I have no idea, but I've noticed too. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it might be just one of these prompts. We're not so different from an LLM when it comes to language. So maybe that's it. I don't know, but rhyming works. Right? It really does. Something psychological about it. I will say unicorns send better than $1 trillion coins. Yeah, indeed. Brandon, what a week. Nolan, you put on a hell of a show. Just getting my voice back. Thanks for all the time and energy with me. Hang out, imparting wisdom. Beyond grateful. Hey, no problem, man. No problem. Loved hanging out with you, man. Always have time for Breakup folks, right? We're lucky we figured out doing Bitcoin right is something important. A lot of folks haven't, and Bitcoin ends up doing them sometimes. Indeed. Would like to hear how was the process of getting Vivek, RFK, Tulsi to Miami. Well, sure. Vivek, I approached Vivek back in October or November. The minute I heard him talk about CBDCs. So when he talked about CBDCs, I said, well, this is a pretty interesting fella. And he was just hitting it, he can hit talking points like a Gatling gun. That's what you want to see when you see someone he wasn't into politics yet. This was all new, right? He was just Strive CEO or something like that. And I said, we definitely have a seat for you. So that started the conversation. And then once RFK came in the mix, we got an early start. Someone on our staff's father at Bitcoin. So with RFK, it was like all hands on deck. Let's get him, right? So if you remember, I mentioned doing a Spaces once with Max and Stacy in the lead up to Bitcoin 2023. We mentioned we really wanted RFK. They said, we have his phone number. So they gave us his phone number and we started texting him. Didn't hear back. I had already reached out to him before he announced as well, using his book. He had a sort of form you could fill out to get him around. So it started to become an all hands on deck situation. The phone wasn't getting through. The emails weren't getting through. So we started asking around for any connections we might have internally. It turns out one of our sales folks, his dad is a political fundraiser. And that was the in we needed. So once we got him, I re-messaged Vivek right away saying, like, get the fuck over here now, right? Like, let's go. What are you doing, buddy? And he signed up right away. Didn't even respond to my email. He just appeared. So I had sent him a link in like January to sign up as a speaker because I use these Airtable links. I use Airtable database, by the way, to manage almost all the show. So he already had a link to sign up as a speaker. So suddenly he just appeared in my onboarded speakers. and his campaign manager was the contact, because I had old emails from his his normal email pre-candidacy, which is where I sent it to him back in January. And so right away, the person who filled in the form which I had sent to him, the link that I had sent to him, put their email. So we contacted that person and we found out it was all for real. Tulsi, I think, just aped in, just an ape in situation. I don't think we did much outreach. I'm not sure. I think she just, sort of heard about it all. So, which is what you want, right? What you want is to get the ball rolling, and then other people say, oh, I can go there too, right? So that's how we did it. That's the story. I like the inside baseball about Foss. Udi derangement syndrome is a real thing. Bravo to you guys for having them at the conference. I think Bitcoin. Yeah. That's all it is about Foss, guys. I mean, he was giving everyone heck for weeks. Oh, I'm up against Saylor. No one's gonna watch. Blah 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 blah. So, that's okay. That's fine. Not easy, guys. You gotta. Our show is sort of a best in class type of situation. So Greg's problem was more existential, right? We told him that. We were like, well, guess what, Greg? You want to hear the real, it's like, when these, you ever had a situation where there was like a pitiful guy in love with a girl and just tell me why you won't date me, right? Tell me why you won't date me. Yeah, they don't want to always hear the answer, right? So we told him the answer, and I don't think he liked it very much, right? It's like you gotta come up with new stuff, right? Is that a bug in my house? I'm like way in the sky here in a skyscraper. I don't know where they come from. So, look, it's not easy. You start hearing footsteps at a certain time in your career, and if you haven't done anything in a couple years, what's going on? You're just talking about Bitcoin. That doesn't quite cut it, right? So, not easy for people to hear, right? There is a lot of ego, right, in events. My only worry, though, again, look, the thing that would suck for Bitcoin is having people putting their ego first and then fighting over where, the worst thing you can do for Bitcoin is that, in some ways, making it so not cool, right? Like just so lame. But whatever, nothing you can do. I forgive the guy. It's cool. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried. Udi derangement syndrome is spot on. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with Udi. Like even like think about what his whole excuses come down to. I love everyone at Bitcoin Magazine. I just don't like the scheduling because pension funds might not buy Bitcoin anymore. Because okay, Greg. All right, you cost Bitcoin. The wizard people, and of course, wizards are an ancient meme in Bitcoin. You had to be around. You had to be there in the old days to get it. So there you go. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about the farmer. Yeah. We'll approach my farmer friend with Bitcoin today. Well, yeah, good job, Rand. I hope that works out. Shake a farmer's hand, man. Right? We need less bond traders in Bitcoin and more farmers, I think. That's what we need. What do we do? Same as happened in post-World War II, cold turkey conversion. Let them work and earn their own keep. Yeah. That's what I mean about okay, you're talking about the UBI. I don't know if there's that many jobs, guys. I mean, really, there isn't. Ignore them. Not going to work either. We can't let guys. This is a battle of hearts and minds, right? If we're the severe the severe survival of the fittest group, nope, that's not going to work. Animals are survival of the fittest, not people, and not Bitcoiners. That's for sure, right? What are you going to say to, look, one of the most beautiful things about Christianity, for example, is when you go and you see all of these Down syndrome people that love Jesus Christ, right? It's amazing. Like, it's one of the best testaments to what Christianity is. The reason Christianity can do this and Islam, for example, can't, or Judaism can't, right? And not to say that they're disrespected in their religion, not to say that, right? I'm not saying Islam or Judaism disrespects Down syndrome people. But both of those religions are all about the scholars and the text and the studying and the intellectualism, and it's so complicated. And oh my God, you memorized the Quran, incredible, right? That's like one of the 5 things you're supposed to do as a Muslim is memorize the Quran. Not criticizing that, just saying that because Jesus speaks like 5 times in the Bible, and all he has to say is like the golden rule and a couple other things, right? It's not like you need a Series 7 license and a Wall Street trading history to understand Jesus Christ, just like Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is quite simple, actually, when you look at it. And Jesus Christ is quite simple when you look at it, right? Do unto others. It's not much more than that. And so when you see the love that, people who might not have a super high IQ have for Jesus, it's sort of perfect, right? It's sort of convincing that he's God, more than look at all these people who know how to memorize and study stuff, right? To me, anyway. And so Bitcoin has to take that similar approach, right? We can't just be like, oh, what about the stupid people? Right? Ignore them. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Now, I'm not saying create a committee, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that if there is a solution out there, you got to listen to it. And I'm just not into ignoring people. It just doesn't work, right? So we'll see. We'll see. Foss had a point, admit it. I mean, plenty of a point, maybe. I mean, what's his point? That like wizards are embarrassing or something? Maybe. I don't think so, right? I mean, I'm the person who scheduled it, so is this point that I need to do my homework? Is that the point, right? That Greg Foss can tell me to do the homework? I don't know about that, right? I'm not sure his Bond experience gives him much of a high ground here. If that's true, then the only thing I still like, anything that keeps Bitcoin cheap for longer might help me stack more. If that's true, that's something I still like about Udi. Yeah, there you go. NVIDIA taking off today. Eyeballs coming to you soon. Yeah, and also Jim Cramer said he's stocking up on NVIDIA. So careful, guys. Careful out there. It's a jungle. It's a jungle. Appreciate your worldviews. Thanks, Rand. Appreciate it. Post World War II didn't have jobs either. Jobs will come, demand and supply. Biggest mistake Germany made is to allow grifters and freeloaders on the welfare state. Don't give excuses for them to freeload. Again, I'm not arguing for it. It's just what I think is going to happen, right? What I think is going to happen. Trying to talk with my own fam, still fruitless after years. Need new approach here. Talking to your own fam about Bitcoin, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's my approach is never to. I don't think I've ever told someone like you got to buy Bitcoin. I think I try to educate about financial literacy and what's going on, and then let people come to Bitcoin themselves. But we'll talk about it more. I'll give more. Maybe I'll do a little episode one day on what I think is useful out there to bring people in. What I think is useful is often what we're doing here, just contrasting with Clown World, right? That's kind of what I think works. Put entertainment in another segment, a politician speaking, all good with Wizard. Just let the oldies learn about without the fun. Yeah, again, like I did not know they were wearing wizard costumes, and indeed, my initial view was that didn't hit right. But we didn't know RFK's speech was going to be as deeply moving as it was, right? I didn't know that. So, and he sort of came to us because it was last minute. You're just looking. You have to go on his schedule. He only has so much time. He says he's available then. We have to go then. You can't really move the schedule that close to an event around that much, right? You start losing your capacity to just knock things in different places. Because if I would move that one, the trickle down effects are, well, everyone on that stage had other things going on during the event, everybody. And once you start doing that, it doesn't end, right? You got to move this person, and then that one moves another one, and then that one moves another one. It's very easy to do changes on one of these complex agendas day one, but we had like how many stages, right? Mining, enterprise, open source, main stage, news desk, and whale lounge. So 6 stages, and nothing you can really, ding ding. Just think it was who was on that panel, right? It's Pete Rizzo. He's on news desk all the time. He had another thing. Eric and Udi both had other things, technical talks about, we didn't just have them up there going on blah blah blah. They were debating about scaling infrastructure and other things, because they do know a lot, right? They really do. And Matt Corallo as well, he was on other things, and Shinobi on other things. They were all on other things, and so that's how it ends up like that, right? That's how it ends up like that. Really not simple. So there you go. Electricity powered telegraph during Civil War. Electricity stocks didn't take off till the light bulb. Yeah. When you let children sit at the, you can expect what you get. Yeah. Yeah. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day. It's going to be a great one. It's going to be a great day. Peace, everyone. Thanks for coming. Always appreciate it. Always appreciate it. But this, we like to get a little good quotes at the end, right? Find it fun. All right, team. Peace, 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 peace.